Hey everybody, welcome back to History with Mrs. Lee. Today we're going to look at the differences between the two major political parties in the early republic, and that is the Federalists versus the Democratic-Republicans. Now, please do not confuse these guys with the two groups concerning the Constitution, the Federalists versus the Anti-Federalists. However, the Federalists and Anti-Federalists were kind of the basis for these two political parties. So first off, we're going to start with the Federalists. The Federalists were led by Alexander Hamilton, who was the Secretary of the Treasury for the first President, George Washington. Another big supporter of the Federalist Party was John Adams, who will be elected as the second President of the United States. He also served as George Washington's Vice President. On the Democratic-Republican side, we have Thomas Jefferson, who was elected as the third President of the United States, and James Madison, who was later elected as the fourth President of the United States. Now, the Federalists, their whole name, Federalists, federal, shows that they support a strong federal government. Whereas the Democratic-Republicans, they were very weary. They were very concerned about having a strong federal government, and they felt that we should give more power to the states and weaken the federal government. All right, so that is probably the biggest difference between those two political parties. Another big difference is that the Federalists favored the national bank. In fact, it's created by Alexander Hamilton in his financial plan in order to help consolidate the debt that we had after the American Revolution. Jefferson, though, with the Democratic-Republicans, felt that the national bank was unconstitutional. He felt it's not mentioned anywhere in the Constitution for the federal government to create something like a bank, so therefore we should not be able to do that. Speaking of, these two groups differ on how the Constitution should be interpreted. And Federalists preferred a loose interpretation of the Constitution, making it flexible and bendable so that it fit their needs and that the federal government was able to use things like the necessary and proper clause to make laws for our country that they felt were necessary and proper, such as creating the national bank. Jefferson and Madison, on the other hand, though, felt that we should have a strict interpretation of the Constitution. And I like that one of my students pointed this out the other day. James Madison at first was a Federalist when it came to ratifying the Constitution. But when it comes to political parties, he joins the Democratic-Republicans, and we're thinking, yeah, James Madison, of course he wants a strict interpretation of the Constitution. He's the father of the Constitution. He feels like he did a good job writing it, so therefore you should follow exactly what it says and not change it to fit whatever needs you want. Okay? Now, the Federalist Party is mostly supported by rich and educated individuals, mostly in the North. And Democratic-Republicans feel like it would be better to have more regular people because they felt that more common people, more ordinary people were more honest in the government. They're going to be supported more by people of the South. Now, this North versus South comes into play again with the Federalists because the Federalists support industry and business. They feel that's the best way for our country to make money in the future is by having lots of manufacturing. Democratic-Republicans, though, they are going to have more support in the South because they support agriculture and farming. They feel like farming is going to be best for our country. Federalists also differ in who they felt we should have alliances or relationships with, and so the Federalist best friend is Britain, and the Democratic-Republicans felt that we should align ourselves with France because they were our first ally in the American Revolution. Now, Federalists also believe that we should have a strong army in case we go to war and have it standing and ready at all times to protect us. And Democratic-Republicans felt that an army was only necessary in times of war because of its cost. Okay? Now, another thing that we discussed in class today was the Alien and Sedition Act. And so Federalists were not as open to having immigrants coming into the country in the late 1700s and early 1800s, while the Democratic-Republicans encouraged more immigration. So when most immigrants got to America in the late 1700s, early 1800s, they usually sided with the Democratic-Republicans. This is going to upset the Federalist Party and will lead to the creation of the Alien and Sedition Act to prevent more votes going into Congress for those Democratic-Republicans.